Good night, everyone, and welcome to Globespan 24/7 once again. I'm Ashiki Soon, your host tonight. I'm very happy about the show tonight. It's an interesting topic about Generation Millennials and Generation Z, expectations and changes for the future. Basically, our discussion is going to be based on the youth perspective versus the old thinking or the old time ways, if I'm putting it in such a way. We have a lovely panel with us tonight. First of all, let me introduce Mr. Timothy Jonas, Chairman of a new and united Guyana, no stranger to our forum. Welcome, Mr. Jonas.
Thank you very much, Asha. Good to see you again. I like your panel.
We
I'm sure it'll
also,
be an interesting conversation.
yes, well, we also have Mr. Rusat Ramgopal with us, who is a law student at King's College of London and the University of Guyana. Mr. Rusat, seeing that you're a new guest to our show, would you like to give a brief introduction so our audience could get to know you a bit better? You have to unmute. Yeah.
Sorry, yes. Thanks again for having me tonight. I believe there was a little bit of an error there. I'm not at the University of Guyana. I'm at King's College London and Georgetown University in the U.S. Not UG. But yeah, thanks again for having me here tonight. I am a law student, and I look forward to offering a youth perspective of the Guyanese American community.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Also tonight we have with us Miss Boyer, who studied at the Institute of Creative Arts, and Mr. Marvin Lee, who is a physics teacher and basically very passionate about youths tonight. So let's start with you, Rusat. Miss Boyer, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
I think we're having some technical difficulties because I'm not hearing her. Well, Rusat, let's start with you. Generation Millennial and Generation Z. Tonight we'll basically touch on economic differences, political differences, and of course, socio-economic focus. Your opinion, what would you like to see for Guyana, for the youths of Guyana? What's your vision?
Well, I mean, my vision generally, you'd obviously want to have more development. If I were to offer a point of view for millennials, Generation Z, I think that the perspective that may have been had by the older generation, I could think of my of oil development. There's other potential as well. So you would hope that there's a more optimistic future. You'd hope that a lot of Americans and Canadians who are of Guyanese descent will take even more interest in Guyana and want to come back in some way themselves. So I'd say the view of millennials and Generation Z when it comes to Guyana should be one of optimism.
Thank you. Ms. Boyer, are you there now?
Yes, I am here. Can you
All
guys?
right, we're not hearing you well, but I would love for you to give a brief introduction. Clearly.
Okay, I'm actually trying to see how to someone that sent me an instruction on how to get this a little better. So I'm checking to see if I can do it. Can you give me a second and come back?
Just give her a few minutes, Dr. Kisoon. She's just working on her audio levels.
Sure, no problem. Timothy, let me bring you in here. That's okay. Um, Looking at the changes that GAN is embarking on right now and a perspective for the future and moving forward. Do you believe that the generation gap that we have between millennials and the Generation Z plays a part or could affect the way we move forward as a nation right now? I think Timothy also had some technical difficulties. Just me and
Yeah,
you.
I mean, if
Yeah.
if I'm the one with the best connection right now, uh,
Yes.
my answer to the question would be that I think the best thing that the new generation has to offer is not just their optimism, but also an entrepreneurial spirit. The Guyanese people, whether they're the older generation or the younger generation, have a inherently hardworking attitude, and they'll whatever they want to do, they'll work at it. So there are new developments in Guyana, new opportunities in Guyana. The elder generation went through struggles, and you would hope that the younger generation uh, will build on what their parents and grandparents achieved, and through uh, a booming economy in the future, have more private businesses, contribute more wealth to the country, and develop it overall.
Got it. Timothy, are you connected now? Break it down a bit right now politically. As you know, we have a lot of political discussions on this show, and we are accustomed of the older generation in Guyana specifically, and I'm sure in other countries around the world. Because of the old way of thinking, they get into old politics. But we, as the young people, we try to look towards the future to do things in a different way. What would be your approach as a young person towards the political system in Guyana and the changes that we could bring as youth towards improving that system?
If, if the question is directed towards me again, I would say that I think that the youth of Guyana has followed, and the youth of the Guyanese diaspora as well has followed the recent elections there, the recent political developments, and also the campaigns of the new parties, your own parties, Dr. Kassoon and Mr. Jonas. Uh, the older generation was in Guyana is still very divided between PP and PNC, but the older generation has those built-in sentiments amongst themselves, and you'd hope that the newer generation would eventually approach politics with a less divisive perspective, and the new parties, the third parties in Guyana, in the recent election, provided a sort of a voice to that. I think that the younger generation of Guyana, hopefully, you would see them try politically to see less of such a divide, because the divide has hindered Guyana's development throughout. And if Guyana is to prosper in the future, you can't just keep dividing along the same lines that they've divided on for the past several decades. You have to move on, and you have to come together.
All right, thank you. Ms. Byers, your mic back up now?
I believe so. Can you hear me now? Hello? Can you hear me?
All right, it's not. Timothy, are you connected? He is not.
I
Mr.
believe
Lee, are
Mr.
you
Mr. Lee
online?
is.
Hi dear, I'm online.
Versat, it's just me and you.
Mr.
So
Lee
let's
is.
have some fun.
Mr. Lee, are
Um,
you?
I'm hearing everyone quite well, but apparently my camera couldn't. I think I scared
all right, I
myself.
guess that's something we could discuss while we're waiting on them. This terrible connection in Guyana right now. As you know, the system has recently been liberated, and we're expecting some improvements. Most of my colleagues here, I'm sure, are still connected with GT&T who are in Guyana, but there are new options available now. Um, so let's get on to the social aspect. We know that growing up, every time politics or elections come around, there's a lot of negativity, racism racing up. We see fighting among friends and families because of political situations. Rusat, have you seen an improvement of those attitudes over the last couple of years? Do you believe that our generation approaches it better than the older generation?
I think that there was a lot of progress made. I do think that, however, this most recent election cycle was particularly divisive for obvious reasons, and I think that maybe some of the progress may have been lost there, but that's not to say it can't be gained back. From every adversity can come a greater equal benefit. So Guyana went through a tough time over the past few months, and you would hope that with a new generation, with a new perspective, you could build on that. I have hope that they will. I think that not just in Guyana but globally, when you look at elections, when you have a party that comes out of power and one party goes back in, it's a time for reflection. It's a time to see what can be done differently. Guyanese politics has been a certain way for the past few decades. Maybe this may be the inflection point where it starts to change and go in a different direction.
And you're not in Ghana at the moment. So while you were looking in and seeing what was happening for the 5 months that the election process was dragged out, what was going through your mind? Because that was new to the whole world.
So I think that's a good point you raised. That I was not in Guyana, but I was following the election. Now, having Guyanese parents, I've always followed Guyanese politics. My on my dad's side, my family's always been involved in Guyanese politics to some extent or another. I think Mr. Jonas may know my father and grandfather, but I was not the only one outside of Guyana following this election. Not just the Guyanese diaspora was following this election. This election cycle in Guyana was covered by Foreign Policy Magazine in the US, The Economist in the UK. It was followed across the world. So I think that the fact that you had the US State Department making routine observations on what was going on this past cycle, it's a new era for Guyanese politics. It's an era where you can't play the same old games as you used to in some ways, because the world is watching what happens in Guyana, and because the world is watching what happens in Guyana, it's a moment where you can set new standards now, and you could head in a brighter future. Like I mean, obviously, I think everybody's watching the U.S. election results right now. I remember on this program just a few months ago, after the Guyanese election crisis, it was said that you hope that one day Guyana can be a country like the U.S., where you can find out the results on election night, accept the results, and move on. We don't know exactly what will happen in the U.S. election over the next few months, but that has been the trend across Western democracies across the world. You hope that this will one day become a regular occurrence in Guyana.
Yeah, that's so true. I was looking at the US elections and I saw what's happening. Lucky for them, what happens here in Ghana is not really prominent there, like all the fighting and the looting and riots and those things. I must say over the last few years it has improved. I haven't seen it as prominent as it was before in the past. Of course, this was my introduction into politics. I was the presidential candidate of the new movement, and it was quite an experience going through that 5 months of animosity and negativity and everything that was happening. But on the way forward, let's discuss some solutions to the problems. We saw a new government instated. They just completed their 100 days in office so far. How do you think they're doing so far? They just finished their 100 days. What's your opinion on that?
Again, is it directed to me or open? I'm
It's
not too sure how the connection's
yes,
going
it's
for the others.
let me
Um,
see, Mr. Lee, are you connected?
Yes, I am, Asha. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
All right, wonderful. So let's get you in here and give Rusat a little rest. Mr. Lee, could you please tell us a bit about yourself as the audience is now meeting you? I know you're a physics professor, so please give us
No, not
a little
professor.
more.
Please don't call me a professor. I just teach physics at the secondary level. I'm not a professor. Good night, Timothy.
Okay.
How are you doing, sir? I know Mr. Jonas. Um, I hope you could remember me. Um, Mark and Rima's son. I hope he remembers that. I hope he can hear me. But anyways, he looks like he can't hear me at the moment. So I am Marvin Lee. I've been teaching for my entire professional life, which is about 15 years. I've been in the system, both private and public. Over that time, I have worked with CXC to set and revise the current CSEC, which is fifth form or grade 11, and the CAPE, which would be grades 12, and 13, the syllabi for those levels. I've been working with them for the better part of 10 years, so I have some experience under my belt. That's as much as I can think of at the moment.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm so happy that you're here. If we're to speak about the future of Ghana, education plays one of the most important parts. Given the recent COVID-19 pandemic and the strain on the students and the teachers that we have been facing, can you give me some insight on what is happening as a teacher in the system right now, some of the challenges and what you believe the children are going through?
Okay, first of all, from the teacher's perspective, there has never been a time like this. And I know that might sound so cliche, but it is true. We have never had a period in time where we were not gathering in large groups, where school was not in session for a prolonged period. And one of the difficulties I faced, and I am speaking from my own experience here, is adapting your style of teaching to a very, very different medium. The faces a science teacher, the inability to demonstrate, to show, to immediately assess problems, because one of the things most teachers do is that you can tell by looking at faces who's paying attention, who's not paying attention. So this move to an online platform has robbed us of a lot of the tools we use to deliver content, to assess our students, and a lot of our assessment is on the spot. Are you paying attention? Can you understand? Do you hear us? All of these things have been lost. And the challenge is that there hasn't been any preparation or any training for teachers to transition to this platform smoothly. It is just, well, we're staying home, teach. And there are schools that are trying, but again, that's a school effort. That's not like a nationwide concerted effort. So that is where I hope I answered your question, because I think I was a bit lengthy, and I hope I did not stray off topic. But those are the main difficulties faced. And I wouldn't even get into the issues of having devices, having internet connectivity, I mean adequate internet connectivity, having the textbooks at hand, because again, in some cases, since school has not been open, students were not able to go and collect textbooks, students were not able to go and get materials. So there are so many factors that have to be addressed when it comes to teaching online and the effects of this pandemic. And In all honesty, I think one of the biggest issues that we faced here as Guyanese was that when the pandemic hit, we were counting votes. And I'm not going to knock anybody who says they were interested in democracy. That's all fine and good. But I think because the nation was so focused on that in the moment, a lot of things that should have been considered, particularly, I'm speaking because of my bias to education, a lot of things were not considered in that moment. And my fear is that we're going to lose a generation of students because of this.
Thank you. Thank you, Shirley. We just had a first-hand account of what it's like on the ground from a teacher in the current COVID-19 pandemic. I must say that even though there are difficulties in the system, at the very least, children do have access to some means of receiving their education right now. For the few who do not have internet access or television, they have been given handouts and textbooks, which also has its challenges. But I have seen the Ministry of Education putting in a real effort. Ms. Boya, are you connected right now?
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, I
Oh,
can.
you can.
Would you please give a brief introduction to our audience so they can get to know you a bit better?
You want me to introduce myself? Is that what you said? You can hear me?
Not really.
Okay. He just carried me through something. The tech guy just carried me through something, and I thought I was being heard better. So is it the volume?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So he said try to raise it all the way. So I just have to go back and the thing that he said to do. So give me 1 second. I know what he wanted me to do the last time. So let me just do that level and tell me if this is better. Is this better? Can you hear me better now?
Yes, we can hear you a bit better.
Okay, so can you repeat the question?
All right, audience, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties tonight. So let's take a break at the moment. And when we get back, we'll continue the discussion when Ms. Boyer and Mr. Jonas can join us. Stay tuned.
Travelspan is pleased to announce that the airport in Guyana is now open. There are flights from New York and Miami non-stop to Guyana. Call Travelspan for all your travel needs to Guyana or for your vacation to Mexico or Punta Cana. Call 718-845-0437. That's 718-845-0437. Flights are now on sale to Guyana and vacation packages are now on sale to Mexico and Punta Cana. Call 718-845-0437. Logistics International, based in Trinidad with representatives in Guyana, is pleased to announce its shipping services from Trinidad to Guyana. Logistics provides shipping services and has experienced personnel to handle all of your shipping needs from Trinidad to Guyana. Buy in Trinidad and let Logistics handle all of your shipping to Guyana from small boxes to container sizes. Call Logistics in Trinidad at 1-868-336-8218 to handle all of your shipping needs, and they handle all sizes. Logistics International has been shipping for over 22 years to many Caribbean countries with reliability and dependability. Call 1-868-336-8218 in Trinidad. That's 1-868-336-8218. Or email at liclcargo@gmail.com. Cannot travel due to COVID? Then treat yourself or your loved one with a gift. Purchase it online, then let Travelspan Shop and Ship take care of the rest. Travelspan is now offering a shop and ship program to Guyana and Trinidad. Cheap rates plus tracking and multiple offices in Georgetown, West Coast Demerara, and Berbice to take care of your package. Treat yourself and ship your Christmas gifts early this year. In Guyana, 227-1701, and in New York, call 347-238-2201. That's 227-1701. And in New York, 347-238-2201. Let TravelSpan and Globespan take care of your online shopping and shipping. Globespan.
Welcome back, everyone, to Globespan 24/7. Please allow me to apologize for the technical difficulties we're having tonight. It seems as though the weather and the internet are not going well at the moment. Mr. Jonas, good night. How are you?
I can now hear you, Ash. I'm afraid I missed half of your show, regrettably.
All right, so I'm happy that you're here now. We've been speaking about this generational gap and the outlook for Guyana politically, socially, and in all other aspects, to be honest. What's your opinion on the 100 days the government just completed in office? I saw that the private sector commission gave them an A star going forward. What do you think about it? They finished 100 days, we're moving forward. Let's have your view on this.
I don't think it's quite 100 days. I've been counting down myself because, as you know, I have promised the new government 100 days of free of criticism so that they can settle in and get started. It's not fair to jump on any new organization that's newly installed. I think that they have shown a lot of energy. They have certainly started off full steam. Too many photo ops, but it's politics, so you can't criticize too much about that. I always laugh when I see ministers loading the last bag of sugar, because if I wanted to pay you to load sugar, I would pay you the standard 20 US a day that goes in Guyana. But if I'm paying you a ministerial salary, I really would prefer you to be doing something ministerial that requires a degree behind the desk. But those photo ops are par for the course, and I can't criticize. There's been a lot of energy. There's been a lot of goodwill, a lot of buoyancy, and you see um, that
Well,
the market is bullish, that everybody's enthusiastic, everybody hopes and thinks that we're headed for great things. So far, I like what I see. I do not agree with some of the appointments, but that is a systemic failing rather than a specific criticism of the government. I've always said, as you know, that if the minister insists on keeping the power to hire the CEO of a company owned by the state, then that's a political appointment. And that CEO will be a very interested person in the next elections, because next elections, if there's a change, he'll be fired. And that is one of the many things that breaks ongoing consistent policies, economic policies, social policies, because of the political interference at management level, decision making level, and boards and missions um, throughout the country. But
okay,
so far, so good.
thank you so much. Ms. Boy, are you connected with us now?
Oh, you can hear me now?
Yes, I can, finally. Welcome to Globespan 24/7. Could you please give a brief introduction about yourself so the audience could get to know you a bit better?
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Rakaya Boyer. how should I identify? I identify as a spiritual being having a human experience. As the bio said on the poster, I did graduate from the Institute of Creative Arts. I've also did attend a lot of other different spaces for technical education and whatnot. And did a lot of different things, some of which include representing Guyana 3 times at Miss Universe, Miss World, and Miss International. I'm the founder and owner of business brand Pro Boutique that has 2 installments, Pro Boutique Walking Tours and Pro Boutique Image and Beauty Pageant Consultancy. In addition to that, I'm a former radio host at 98.1 Hot FM, 96.1 Voice FM, and I also hosted my own and produced my own television show called #One Love with Ricardo. Other than that, I'm in artistry and business, and I did study for a period international relations at the University of Guyana for a period. I did not complete that period. However, I had 3 years of great information and exchange and definitely big on networking. So I'm very grateful to be a part of this panel discussion and share my voice in whichever way I can and contribute to this conversation. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Well, I guess the first question I'm going to pose to you tonight is, do you feel optimistic about the youth of Ghana moving forward? We have seen the electoral turmoil that we went through for 5 months. Finally, a government is instated. How do you feel about our future as young people in Guyana? Socially, economically, or politically? Take your pick. It's okay.
I personally, so I'll give a personal response to this. I personally believe that in the totem that you're the master of your own fate and you're captain of your own soul, and that you should not, as a youth or as a millennial, or even if you're part of Generation Z, leave anything up to anyone to determine how functions or development takes place. It's a credit to the quote that we all know: "Be the change you want to see." Change starts with you. I do know that there are ways in which we go about certain protocols that are there within the establishments, and there's certain loopholes that you would have to jump to get to certain spaces. However, you got to begin at home with you, when you look in the mirror. So in terms of how the youth move forward, really, it's basically just study, become a part of systems that you want to influence, whatever sector it is you want to influence. Get involved at grassroots levels, get involved in whichever way you can, whether it's community clubs and whatnot. Start there, start with what you have, start with the resources that you have, just start. Read as much as you can, expand your level of thought, the way you think, the way you process information, and definitely get in spaces with elders or persons who are in certain spaces that you want to influence and learn from them. Other than that, I really feel it's up to you to really make a decision. I feel we don't recognize our power, and a lot of times we often leave things to chance, and that usually, as a result, causes the effect, whatever it is that we probably don't want or want. It depends. It can go any way. So personally, I'm somebody that personally believes in, if you want something, just go and get it. However, there's power in numbers and group effort, and there's a lot of strength in also study. You can't just achieve something if you're not going to study what is necessary to attain the steps of success. So many have done it before, and if you want to follow in the same footsteps, all you have to do is study the same principles, devise ways about how you want to go about achieving what you want to achieve, and just go for it.
All right, great advice to the young audience that's out there. Gustav, let's bring you back in here at the moment. You're a law student, right? So the first thing I'm gonna ask you is, Ghana has recently had an oil boom. We're going forward as an oil producing nation. Do you believe that there's enough transparency and it's being done in the right way so far? You have to unmute.
Sorry, yeah. On the issue of the oil deals and transparency, obviously it's a complicated issue, but if you look at what experts have said, you've had think tanks and international groups, transparency groups like come forward and say that the deal was one that had elements of corruption. Now, so these are outside third-party international sources saying, and not just domestic or political groups. Now, obviously, when it comes to renegotiating a deal, you have to be very careful about it. There is a good cause to say we need to be more transparent, we need a new deal, we need things like that. At the same time, I think Guyana has to be very careful, because if you do start this trend of let's renegotiate this bad deal, you have to make sure that you're going to keep certain foreign investor confidence that when these investors are going to come to Guyana in the future, hopefully, that they're not going to have the impression that they're going to have one deal with this government, and then once the government changes, the next government's going to they're going to have a new deal with that government. So it is something to keep in mind. But I think specifically on this issue of the oil, yes, you do need a lot of transparency. Oil in general, it's a potential for boom for Guyana, but you have to keep in mind that there have been many countries that you have this Dutch curse. You have all this hope in oil. You think that it's going to be the savior of the country, and you over rely on it, and it ends up not working out too well. You don't have to look too far for that. You could look right next door at Venezuela. Venezuela, it was poorly managed. They were one of the richest countries in the region, and now they're in economic turmoil. So on the oil issue, you have to keep all those factors into account. Now, I was jotting down some things on the side as the conversation was going on earlier. The question was asked about how do you think the government is doing so far, the first 100 days? I think that the government, you have to commend the job that they're doing on COVID. They are clearly trying to do a lot in their response to the pandemic. You could see the pictures of them trying to hand out PPE and other things. The Ministry of Education has also been trying to adjust to this new reality where you have to have this online learning. And it is a tough thing to do. Every country in the world is struggling with it. Even somewhere as developed as New York City is struggling with it. So obviously Guyana will have their issues with it. But in terms of other issues on how the government has handled it, you do have to take into account the circumstances under which they came in, and maybe grade them on a curve because of that. But there are significant issues. I was asked earlier about how do you think certain divides are going to go, and I said I'd be optimistic that this generation will have a different view than the last one. The last one was unfortunately very pessimistic about certain things because of the experiences they had, and I hope that some of the events that took place not too long ago in Guyana does not leave a certain impression on the next generation. It was mentioned I'm a law student. I also work at the State Department, and at the State Department we were following the reports in the New York Times of the racial violence that went on in Guyana not too long ago after this election cycle, the Henry Boys incident and the Hooray Singh incident. So there were tragic killings in Guyana. The government's handling of it is something that you can look into it, but you also have to say if people in the country did not feel safe at that given point in time, you hope that they don't have certain memories into the future. I remember when this was happening, I know elderly Guyanese who had memories of the 1960s. I know middle-aged Guyanese who looked at that and had their own memories, and I hope that the next generation of Guyanese cannot have those types of feelings in the future. So you have to take that into account. You have to try to unify. And I was asked about this question as a law student. As a law student looking at what's going on in Guyana today, you see that after this elections crisis, you do have to hold certain people accountable, but you have to do it in a legitimate, proper way. You have to make sure that the trials, the prosecutions that go on will be seen as legitimate trials and not political trials. And these are all things you have to keep into account as you move on into the future. But overall, I am optimistic about the future, the next generation of Guyana. I think that the Guyanese American population is growing. I think that there will be continued ties between the diaspora and Guyana, and it will be mutually beneficial. I think that the fact that Secretary Pompeo went to Guyana recently and was the first U.S. Secretary of State ever to visit the country, highest-ranking U.S. official in history to visit the country, was a good sign. And I'm optimistic about the future of the U.S.-Guyana relationship. I'm optimistic about the future of Guyana overall.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lee, let me bring you back in here with all your young people and your babies. You as a teacher, What advice would you give them on looking towards the future positively? Yes, we have COVID-19 pandemic. Yes, there's some difficulties they're facing right now, but to give them a bit of hope, to let them look forward to something good that's coming. I mean, Guyana's at the brink of taking off towards the future of opportunity. What would you say to your students?
Um, Take responsibility. I I don't think enough of our young people have a strong sense of hope in the older ones. I'm being very honest here. And I don't think they believe that one, their voices will be heard, and two, that their voices will matter. And I sense and I see in a lot of them that there is just this, well, they're not going to listen to us anyway attitude, so we might as well just not speak. And I think if young people just take some form of responsibility and take ownership for their future, we have a culture here of constantly looking to the past. We act as if our greatest leaders are all dead and gone. We all know their names. We hear them every election season. And we rarely find that we put young people in a place where we listen to them, first of all, and we give them a chance to actually plan and execute on their ideas. We tell them we want them, we tell them we need them, we say they're important, we sing we are the world and you are our future. But then little is done to actually make them believe that in terms of handing them some amount of, I shouldn't say control, but giving them the tools, the agency, the responsibility to do things. And I think it has to work both ways. I think they have to not give up hope, and we as the older folk have to give them hope. I don't think that they can fight us for it. Not just hope, also, I think young people need better role models in terms of how to work when we don't agree. I think also young people need to, how do you put it this way? Um, I think they need to also see more doors open. So many young people are hemmed in by cultural restrictions, in some cases racial restrictions, if we're being honest, um, not knowing the right people to get them into the right places, and all these things that are not readily acknowledged aspects of Guyanese life and culture. And I think if young people can actually have hope and take responsibility for the future and become more engaged, and for them to do that, we as the older ones, the elders, the leaders, we have to give them some of that responsibility and hope and agency as well. I think when those two combine, I think they are going to have a bright future, but I don't think it's totally up to them, and I know it's not totally up to us. It's something that has to happen when both sides agree and there is a marriage of effort from both ends.
All right, thank you very much. Timothy, I know you have a response to a few things that were said earlier. Basically, on the way forward, what can be done for our young people? What can be done for the youth in and out of Guyana that are so passionate about their country, that have been restricted by this generational difference, the old way versus the new way?
Mr. Jonas, you are muted.
As you know, Ash, I tend to walk and step back at the feel good sound bites and platitudes, so I'm not going to go there. I think that what Mr. Lee said is right. There, what we need to do is appreciate why the youth in Guyana now are different from the youth in Guyana 20 years ago. Because 20 years ago, I was young and I was there, and what's the difference? And 20 years before that. It's only if we appreciate why they're different that we'll be able to admit where they're the same, the situations, the occasions where there's remain similarities. And that will allow us to identify how we can help and how the new crop of youngsters can help. I'll give you an example. In the 5 seconds that I heard your original conversation, I heard Mr. Ram Gopal say I knew his grandfather and his father, and the penny suddenly dropped. Correct me if I'm wrong, Lalta and Mahendra. Now, when I was a young lawyer,
Yeah.
Lalta Ram Gopal was already of some vintage, but he was very, very kind-hearted and reached out to me and offered me help when I needed it. Um, his son Mahendra didn't spend a long time in Guyana as a lawyer and migrated. But I have a firm memory of Lalta, who is no longer with us, of course, because he was of that generation of Indo-Guyanese lawyer that came from his peculiar background and was absolutely open-minded and receptive. To me, a Jonas, my name wasn't Pusadar Singh. Um, and for that reason, I think that the first thing we got to do is try to stop, identify, and stigmatize a particular generation. I think we got to try to identify where the hopes are and where the fears are. One of the wonderful things about the current generation is their exposure by social media, by television, and by ease of travel to being out of Guyana and seeing how things should be. You see, my generation didn't have that opportunity. We spent our lives right here on the dam, not seeing very much. And therefore, the ugliness that Guyanese society can become was a norm for us. It wasn't an unusual thing for us. It wasn't something that we thought, our leader is a banana republic despot who is not allowing us free elections. And it's an unusual thing to have to line up to buy gasoline for your car if you're lucky enough to have a car. That was the norm. But the youngsters these days, because of their access to television, to internet, and to travel, see how it should be, how it could be. And therefore, that gives them a standard by which they can judge what is in Guyana and see what is wrong with Guyana. They can look at the race relations, the economic relations, the political relations, not in a bubble of Guyana, but comparing it to how it should be because how things work so much better out of Guyana. And that gives them an objectivity that earlier generations didn't have. I think that's vitally important. If we can use that to help through our younger generation, Guyana move away from its old inherited issues of race relations, political relations, economic relations, our old stultified ways of thinking. I think that's the solution. It is born of exposure to what is out of Guyana so that we have an ideal that we can aspire to. And we're not sunk in the morass as the earlier generations have been simply because their horizons were so limited. They never saw what the possibilities were because they never got to see beyond our shores. So even when you hear the group here talking, they are more articulate, they're more open-minded, they're more receptive. When you hear older guys talking, you just gotta hear some of those inarticulate men, the old political regime on TV or radio, and you feel them grasping for words, grasping at cliches and oft-repeated phrases, not expressing themselves properly, and you compare it to what people do. And immediately you see you're on the right track. You're moving in the right direction. On the flip side, you have to acknowledge that with experience comes an understanding of systems. And when you're 20, you're looking for a job, you're looking to finish your education, you have no money in your pocket, you got to make a living. You have other priorities. So you cannot expect too much from someone who is now starting out on his professional career or maybe on his tertiary career. Um, but to me, it is a foundation for hope for the future. And I do like what I see.
Thank you very much. That's very well said, Mr. Jonas. I really appreciate your wisdom here as somebody who is part of this generational gap, the generation
Don't
gap
call me
that we
old,
have
Ash.
right now. So the young people sitting with me are thinking, yes, this is a wise man sitting here with us. Miss Boyer, can I get you in here now before we start wrapping up? Miss Boyer, if there's something as a young woman who I could tell is very passionate about what she does and you're very dedicated to your goals. If there's something that you want to see happening in Guyana to help the generations to go forward and to have more synergy and more unity, what would that be?
More women in charge.
Okay, she says more women in charge. Can you explain a bit more to the audience?
Because it's the patriarchy that's destroying this whole world. And when the main structures break down because of the patriarchal system that's in place, it just trickles down to Guyana and we don't know what we'd be doing with ourselves. That's the problem. So put women in charge and we gonna do, like we could pass into ourselves after spaces like New Zealand. They're doing a great job at moving forward and that generational divide that we seem to have a problem with in certain spaces in this world. I feel like if we as a collective, whether it's socially, politically, religiously, however we choose to be, I feel we make excuses for things that there are answers to right in front of our faces, and we could study, mimic, if we wanted to create that change. I feel there's a lot of like nuances and a lot of things that we kind of just gloss over or we talk about like politically correct or this and that, and it's really simple. Life is really simple. I mean, if you just follow the natural order of things and you do away with all the other shenanigans, it will fix itself. So put women in charge because they always obviously end up having to fix everything when it falls apart. So you might as well just let them lead from the jump. Or at least have them integrated and let's leave the ego out of how we run things. So I feel like if I'm being straight talk with Kaya, that's it. But if you want a pageant answer, I could give you that too. So what's it going to be?
I appreciate straight talk.
Okay, cool.
When you step into the political arena, I can understand your sentiments because I relate to them. However, we could have an entire segment on women in politics, and I'll invite you on that show. The thing is, as a young woman or as a woman in general, if you stand up and try to fix things, you're labeled as a dictator. If a man does it, he's given respect. He's told, well done. He's a strong man. So, the audience,
why do we care? Like, why do we care? So, like, if you don't mind, it's like I feel like. Again, I'm really really, especially in 2020, especially like how we've experienced so many drastic changes and so many systems shifting in such a huge way that's affecting our lives in so many different levels, spiritually, cellular-wise, social-wise, everything is shifting so like drastically. So I feel like we could just really simplify it to the things that really matter. And if we hone into that and really put things back in that order, regardless of what it looks like on surface or what is said or speculated about it, then it will fix itself. We complicate things a whole lot. Life is simple. Even politics, but even that would be complicating. And we know we'd be complicating this when we're complicating it. That's the funny part about it.
Thank you very much. Audience, thank you for being with us tonight. We're going to start having our closing comments from our guest tonight. Rusat, let's start with you. Can you give your final thoughts if there's anything you wanted to say that you're not able to say so far?
Yeah. Well, once again, thank you so much for having me tonight. Just to close off, yes, Mr. Jonas, that was my father and grandfather. I'm glad you remember them. So to wrap up, I'll just say that, and to connect Ms. Boyer's point at the end there, I'm optimistic about the youth of Guyana, the next generation. Hopefully there is less of a gender gap or a racial divide in the future. Hopefully the mistakes of the past are not repeated in the future. And I talked mostly about the politics tonight. I think my dream scenario for Guyana is that one day Guyana is not only a more developed nation, a closer U.S. ally, but that Guyana politically is a country where people will go into the voting booths and will not be voting for one party or another because of their race. I hope the next generation of Guyanese are voting for one party or another because of their policies, like like is the case in most Western democracies? Or you hope that maybe the political arguments will be on issues and not just one not just the same issue that's divided Guyanese for so long. And hopefully we can see more of Dr. Kissoon and Mr. Jonas in the next generation of Guyanese politics as time goes on. So thank you once again for having me tonight.
Thank you so much. Mr. Lee, can I have your closing comments, please? And if there's anything else you wanted to say to the audience that I didn't ask, please go ahead.
Mr. Lee, you are muted.
Thank you for correcting me. I'm sorry, I was speaking when I was muted. I don't have anything extra to say except to my students, to anybody in the teaching profession out there. Try to find ways to clear your mind and try to find ways to, it might sound so cliche, but just to recharge, get some form of energy, because the online platform is draining. It's not as exciting as it might seem from the outside, and it does take a lot out of both teachers and students, especially when teachers are trying to teach and students are genuinely trying to learn. So to both teachers and students, and to parents who have 3-4 kids at home all online, try to find some way to recharge, to clear your mind, and to go again, because this is going to be a long struggle, and we're going to have to take it one day at a time. Sorry for the cliches.
Thank you so much. Great advice. All the parents listening, please take notes. We had some input from a teacher on the ground today. Let your children recharge. You yourselves need to recharge. The teachers out there, the new dynamics and adaptation is always hard, but we are hopeful that things will get better. Ms. Boya, please, for your final remarks.
Pardon? Final
comments and remarks before we close up.
Well, I just want to thank all of you for the opportunity for sharing, this space. I'm always grateful for platforms that allow me to, contribute anything that is of millennial side. And I just want to encourage everyone who is viewing at this point to, really just stay committed to each other and really be kind to yourselves and each other, because we're really in some times that requires collective group effort to really pull through. And we're just at 2 more months for the end of a year that's been, very chaotic for a lot of persons, and a lot of persons are still going through it. So I just really want to send positive light and energy to those persons who may be feeling like, they've lost everything, or they don't know what's going to come next, and really just hold steadfast and know that, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. So plan, prepare, and know that you are in charge of your own destiny regardless. Praise God, and also be all good. So yeah, that's basically it. One love to everybody, and thank you again for allowing me within this space. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Timothy,
I want to respond to what Ms. Hall said about letting women run everything. Now,
what are you saying?
Now, in my experience, the best judges I have appeared before have been female. What I have found is that as men become more senior, more competent, there's this curse of testosterone that they also become more pompous and more filled with their own ambition and their own skill and their own importance. And I think that the curse of testosterone actually makes men, successful men, worse leaders. And if you look at the current judiciary we have, the Chief Justice we have now, in my opinion, is the best that I've ever appeared before. But not just because she does her work as a judge, but because of how she manages the administration of the court, including adjusting to the needs of COVID, managing the virtual court, transforming the physical courtroom and the physical court area in a way that is more accessible, it's nicer to look at, it's more user-friendly. So for the first time in my professional career, we are meeting the needs of the society And I really attribute it to the fact that it is women in charge who have not just been puffed up and self-satisfied at their, legal status and the fact that they're some self-appointed luminaries, but because they have continued to be conscientious, hardworking, day to day, meeting the needs of the people. And I want to say I agree with Miss Alt. The best leader in the Caribbean right now is Maya Motley, who is a senior lawyer and a prodigious intellect. When you talk to her, you're standing on tiptoes, and has, with common sense and ordinary basic leadership skills, helped guide Barbados through COVID and through some economic distress that it hasn't felt in 40 to 50 years. I would like to see Miss Alt and her friends come on board and take charge in terms of leadership roles. And the one note of caution I will sound, and this is personal experience, is that for some reason in Guyana, maybe because our institutions are so poorly run, are so fragile, most women, with the exception of Asha, are much too sensible to come and jump on board the political bandwagon. Asha apparently has a screw loose, so she's willing to come with the rest of us and take her chances. But I would like to see you come and join and come on board and demonstrate what I believe, which is that people like me are cursed with testosterone and therefore go wrong. And we need more practical people like you who can come and do it. So I would love to do a show with you, Asha, on that particular issue.
Yes, this is great. Audience, we have it on video. That this has to be an entire segment of discussion. We will have Timothy Jonas, we'll have back Ms. Boyer, and we'll have further discussions on it. I love the energy and I love the optimism tonight. There are few forums where you'd find anybody endorsing the fact that women should step forward. And the fact that so many people have called for it, especially Mr. Jonas, saying that there are some great women leaders in Ghana. It gives me so much hope as a young woman coming into politics. I looked at the entire world scenario, and there were very few women who were able to step up to those standards. Maya Motley, of course, there are New Zealand leaders. We had Chief Justice Desmond Bernard. We have the current Chief Justice. So there are women that have been taking these roles and stepping forward, and it has been beautiful. To all my panel tonight, I'd like to say thank you once again for being with us and for sharing. It was an awesome segment. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties, audience, but it will be better in the future. If you would like to donate to Globespan 24/7, all details are on the page. And please tune in with us next time. Thank you very much. Bye, guys.